Hey everybody, I want you to take all of your mixes and throw them in the garbage. Just kidding. In today's video, we're going to be going over my Ableton project setup. For all of you Ableton Live Lite and Intro users, I'm going to be providing a free template using only built-in audio effects and free plugins that you can get on the internet. In this video, I'm making a track in a drum and bass style, but you can modify it to make other types of electronic music. Let's go. To follow this tutorial, you're going to need the Melodic production plugin bundle, Xfer Records OTT, Spitfire Audio Labs, and Polyverse Wider. Alright, so starting from the top, let's listen to the track. Make sure I don't have anything soloed like a chump.
It's a Tennessee thing. I gotta stay till I die. I gotta stay. I gotta stay.
Artillery, bro. Alright, so from the top of the drum rack, all of these samples are free. They're from a few different sample companies, so you need to download them to use them, but you can replace them with your own samples. I just have a few panned hi-hats, a center hi-hat, which is the main one. That guy. And then kick and clap. All the hi-hats, I guess all but one of them, are from Cymatics. They release a lot of free sample packs. They're a little generic, but for this, they work. The kick and clap are from Slate Digital. They have a few free sample packs. Both of these are from their Vintage Drum Machines 909 edition. It's free. Great 909 sounds. Basic stuff for electronic music. Now if we look, each one of these has a little bit of processing, nothing too crazy. I scooped some of the mids and added some high-end content on the kick, and then a little bass boost in the sub area, about 50 hertz. And all of these little scoops tend to be fundamentals of other things that I don't want to clash with. So if we look at the low hump and the high part on this clap are pretty much the same as these two spots that I've ducked out on the kick. And this mid-range is going to be where a lot of that growl sound comes from, that growl bass. So I don't want any of those to clash. I use effects returns inside of drum rack to create some flexible routing, which you hit show hide chain list on the left side of drum rack, and then show hide input output section and show hide return chains. I did two effects return chains. You can do that by right clicking, create return chain. One for hi-hats. You can see all these panned hi-hats get sent to this, and it's just an EQ for all of them to tame the highs, cut the mids out, cut the low out, create like a little bump, that fundamental attack on the hi-hats. In the template, I also have one for kick and snare. The kick and snare, or in this case the clap, aren't getting sent to it. That's because my sidechaining is coming from the kick in this track. Sometimes I will sidechain the kick and the snare, just if the mix is really crowded and I need things to get out of the way of the snare. This clap is really punchy, cuts really well, so I don't use it. It's there in case you want to rack output, kick snare, and then use that for your sidechaining. I'm gonna skip vocals because vocals pretty much just compression, OTT, just to like make it sit. I'm gonna skip over to all the melodic parts. First, I'm gonna look at the melodic bus. So I took all my melodic parts, right click, group tracks, and it creates this group. If you add effects to that, it affects everything inside the group. That's how I do my sidechaining. So I added a compressor to that. That compressor is taking audio from drum rack. Below that, you can select where from drum rack. So I could either get it from that kick snare return that I created or the kick itself. If I play it, anytime the kick plays, sub, the growl, keys, everything ducks out. Instruments. I have Analog Lab 5 as my key sound, and it's just one of their presets. Now this plugin isn't free necessarily, Analog Lab Intro, but it comes bundled with almost every audio interface or MIDI controller. At least it comes bundled with a lot of them. I'm guessing you might already have this. If not, you can replace it with a built-in Ableton instrument, which I would go to either piano and keys, or maybe mallets or synth lead. See, you could just as easily replace it with that, and it would do just about the same. The only processing I have on it, other than that group bus, is Xfer Records OTT. I compress most of the low end and make the attack time just super fast. I guess that's attack and release. Really fast compression, not really doing anything to the mids or highs. You can hear it with and without.
For the first time, it's going down history, baby.
Just add some juice, some punch. After that, we've got this Ambience sound. This is a pad from Spitfire Audio Labs. It's like kind of vocally sounding, spacey. I added a filter to cut out the lows and create a bump with the resonance. Chorus ensemble, which is just, you know, chorus to create that movement. If I solo it, just cut the lows. That's it without the chorus. That's what the chorus is doing, making it wider. And then also OTT. This, I'm compressing everything a lot, but I'm keeping the depth. I used that to find a sweet spot. Usually I'll over compress a little bit and then I'll back the depth off a little bit to get it somewhere between that over compressed sound and the original sound before I added OTT. After that, we've got sub bass, complex neurologist bass, which is a bass instrument rack in Ableton. Boom. It's kind of perfect for neuro, drum and bass, but I'm using it as a sub. I'm using Melda Audio M-Bit Fun, mostly dry, 10 bits, some delay. Adds just like a little bit of high mid content, nothing too crazy. You can actually hear it more when I take the M equalizer off. Yeah. Now this growl sound, again, it's just another stock Ableton bass instrument rack, Fanatic bass. But this, I have an auto filter, and this is probably the most processed part of the track. So I'll run all the way through it. So the main like movement, that wobble, that thing that you hear in a lot of drum and bass, neuro, rollers. Let's look at the automation lane. Auto filter, you can see it's modulating the frequency and the resonance. And the way I did it is if you click this guy, yeah, automation arm, you have that clicked and you record on a loop. You could just be dragging this while it's playing, and it'll record that change to the automation. So I'm just, you can see it's pretty powerful. Let's actually turn all these off so you can hear it without everything. Saturation. And this, I'm taming a lot of the bass because I want all of that bass to be coming from the sub. I really just want this to be occupying the mids and the highs. And this I just use to boost the fundamental right above the sub region and then boost the mids and cut off some of that tinny high end because it clashes with the hi-hats. Then I add a little reverb. It's not the reverb on the send because this is like really short reverb and it just thickens it, as opposed to adding big washed out space. That's what the reverb send is for, in my opinion. So it just kind of creates like a tail, makes it sound wider. And then I use Polyverse Wider
to make it even wider.
So it's occupying stereo space on the left and right, almost like two hard pan guitars, whereas the sub is sitting right in the middle. And then I have these two effects tracks, which they just have EQ on them, but that's where all of my little sounds, impact,
MJG.
riser, and then a cymbal higher impact that blends with that. These are also in the Melodics bus, so even those are getting ducked out by the kick anytime the kick hits. And really only the vocals in the beginning, and I guess both effects, are getting sent to my reverb and delay bus. Usually in a stock project, you'll have a separate delay and reverb. I like to put them both on the same send just because I think usually they go together. Now I do scoop out a lot of the low and mid territory with a little 3-band EQ just because you don't want any of that mid-range material clashing with your synths, your effects, your vocals. You really just want your reverb to fill in the gaps, which a lot of that is like high-end solo, the reverb. Yeah, mid-rangey that is. That just sounds a little bit tighter. Now the master chain, really simple. I usually master with Ozone as well as a few other paid plugins, emulations of hardware gear, but sticking with this kind of challenge template of only free stuff, only stuff you can find in Ableton so that it's accessible for everybody. I'm just using the stock Ableton compressor, stock Ableton limiter. If you've mixed everything really well, you can get a pretty damn good master with just the compressor and the limiter, maybe an EQ, which I would put after the compressor. I tend to find myself, I usually have to tame lows because I can't sense that in my room, and I usually duck somewhere in the 100 to 150 hertz range just to create a tighter bass. Sometimes I'll even bump in the 50 hertz range, not even a decibel, just a tiny bump just to make up for that tightening of the bass. I usually mix naturally scooped mids, but sometimes mastering need a little mid scoop. Noticed on my mixing setup that I need to add a little bit more highs back in, so it adds something. But compressor and the limiter are doing most of the work. Simple settings, 4 dB of gain, short look ahead. I think too much look ahead can be kind of unnatural sounding. I turn off auto release on the limiter, set it pretty short. I tend to make really small adjustments to the release. Try to hear where the audio creates like a pumping sound, but also sounds, natural and not overly aggressive or pumping out of time. Can sound really weird. The compression ratio is set pretty low again. Mastering, I try to keep the compression gentle. I don't like setting the attack too high because I think the samples that I pick with the hats, the kick, the clap, they're already really transient heavy. So I don't want to overemphasize that because it's just going to sound like it's poking out of your speakers too hard. I want it to punch out of the speakers, not to like poke out of them, It's hard to explain, but I think that sounds a little bit better. Release time slower than the release times on the compressors for all the instruments because I want my mastering compression to be gentle and all about movement, and then the faster, harder movement coming from the limiter. At least that's how I tend to think about it. So yeah, that's my mixing template. That's how I go about mixing a project. I usually mix a little bit while I'm working. Big part of it is sound selection. I mean, even with all the processing taken off of this kick, it's still a damn good kick because it's from a 909. And then you add, a little bit of clipping, a little bit of compression, a ratio of 3.6. That's pretty gentle. Fast attack, so it's punchy. Slow release, which if you keep the release times really fast tends to bring out the tail a lot in kick and snare sound. So by making your release a lot slower, it can make compressed kick sound snappier, shorter. I also tend to shorten the tails of my samples to make them punchier. I mean, you can hear before I do that, it's sounds fine by itself, but in a mix, I don't know, I think it can cloud a mix too much. That one is not too big of a deal, but for the kick, I think it really does. So yeah, sample selection, super important. Plugin and instrument rack selection, very important. What I really like to do is find a few tracks, build a playlist of songs that are in a similar style to what I want to accomplish, and then I'll try to pick samples or instrument racks inside of Ableton that sound pretty close, or that I know I can get closer with the use of a couple plugins, as opposed to trying to add like 7 different plugins in a row to get a specific sound. The only one that I really overprocessed was this Growl sound, and it's because I had like a very specific kind of neuro DMB that I had that in mind, and I had a pretty good bass for it, but really wanted to nail it. Everything else didn't really need a lot because I focused on sound selection first. So there you go. Like I said, the link to this template is going to be in the description of the video. You can also download samples and loops that I've created at my website at swampwampa.com. You can also listen to my music there or on any streaming service. If you feel like your tracks could use a little bit of spice, go to the services section of my website, fill in the little form, and I should be able to help you create your next masterpiece. But yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what kind of video you want me to make next. Give me a follow on all of the social platforms.